The Legend of Heroes series has been a part of my life for such a long time, since Trails in the Sky 1 when it came out in the West. And then I got review copies for Trails in the Sky 3, and then I got review codes for like Cold Steel 2, 3, and 4. And I just went all the way from beginning to end with Cold Steel and Sky. But it was always those two Crossbell games that I didn't know anything about, which made my Cold Steel experience a little bit more frustrating because there was a lot of context and characters and story and lore that I didn't get because there was never an official release for any of these titles. But of course, there was a small little team of really talented individuals called the Geofront, and those guys took it upon themselves to create the best possible translation for The Legend of Heroes Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure, the two Crossbell games. And one of those people was Scott Tijerina. He was the lead editor for The Legend of Heroes Trails to Azure, which of course NAS America came in and decided to collaborate with this team so that we could get the official release of those two games. We really need to thank the Geofront team, and we need to thank Scott as well. Unfortunately, he passed away a while ago, but the impact that he has made onto this community with the translations, with his Let's Plays, with his videos on YouTube talking about how to get into the Legend of Heroes series and stuff. He was always an entertaining guy, really determined to put in good work when it comes to these games, and his efforts are very much appreciated. It's so appreciated, in fact, that in the credits for Trails to Azure, you get to see a little memorial towards the end, which I think is really sweet, really considerate for NAS America to do this. So I appreciate it, and I just want to say thank you not only to Scott, but also to the Geofront team, to NAS America, to this really wonderful and very determined community that, like, no matter what, we want to experience these games. We want to be able to play them. We want to put our money in it and say, yes, we want to see more of this. And we are, NAS has got our back in that aspect, right? With Trails to Reverie, Nayuta, and all of the other future games that are going to be coming out, right? Kuro no Kizuki 1 and 2 that are not out yet over here, but it looks like they're pretty much on their way over. So it is a shame that we lost someone as wonderful as Scott, someone as talented as him. It's a very major loss. It is the end of an era, in my opinion. And, all my thoughts go out to all of the people that knew him. I only knew his videos and stuff. I didn't know him personally, but his work with, translating all of these games definitely affected me. I mean, like, I love these games. They're a very, very big part of my life. And so his efforts will not go forgotten ever. Like, all of that work will just last forever in these games and in the memorial put on the official release of Trails to Azure, right? The dream came true, and we only have him and the Geofront team to thank for that. But anyway, now we're going to move on to actually talking about the game. I'm sorry, I know it's like a bummer to mention this kind of stuff, but I think it's important because, without any of these guys, without Scott and the Geofront team, none of these games would be possible, so they deserve to be mentioned a million times over. But yeah, from here on out, I'm just going to gush about how much I love Trails to Azure. If you guys remember not too long ago, I put out a video gushing and talking for like 20 minutes over how much I love Trails from Zero and how much I love The Legend of Heroes in general. When I'm pointing here, ignore the elf statue putting his ass out in front of this other face. The explanation for that is that I think it was a birthday present. Yeah, a long time ago, it was my birthday, and my younger brother loves giving me like prank presents, so just really silly, stupid stuff. There was a book that he gave me called How to Deal with Erectile Dysfunction. And so this is another one of those prank gifts. I remember another year he gave me a Minecraft book, like Farty Steve versus Stinky Steve or something. It was a book about Minecraft Steve farting a lot. So yeah, just ignore that and focus on me talking about the game. So not too long ago, I put out a video just gushing about Trails from Zero, the previous game to this one. And so if you guys saw that video and you were convinced that you had to play Trails from Zero and you played it and you loved it and you just want to see more of it, well, guess what? Trails to Azure, the sequel, is basically that, just more of what made the previous game great, and more of what makes The Legend of Heroes in general really, really great, which is mainly just good writing, great world building, awesome character banter with everybody. It's so much better than like the Marvel movie banter that we get these days. It's so much better written and so much more clever, and it just feels more natural, right? The characters feel very human. All of the characters that you love are still in it. You know, Ellie, Tio, Randy, Lloyd, they're all in here. And with some new additions, there's actually new Triple S members. And I'm very happy about this because in my playthrough of Trolls from Zero, I was praying to Aidios saying, please make Noelle Seeker into a Triple S member. She needs to be part of the crew. Noelle is so great and so awesome. I love her. My wife, my military wife, Noelle, and guess what? She is in this game, and she's a party member right out of the gate, which makes me so happy that, she becomes a party member, and then later on, just like, oh yeah, she's a part of the Triple S now, and then like, hell yeah, awesome. We're starting the game off with the best possible start. Wazi, or Wazy, I like to call him Wazy because it sounds like a rapper name, but like, Wazi Hemisphere, one of the gangsters from the previous game, is here now as a Triple S member as well. So now that Randy and Tio are not with you at the beginning, they're off doing their own thing. They eventually come back. They are a part of the story, but they got some stuff going on, They got their own thing, and so for now, you got these other two members, Noelle, my wife Noelle, and Wazi. They're gonna fill in alongside Lloyd and Ellie as like the four guys that you're gonna be sticking with for a pretty good chunk of the game. And honestly, I'm not really gonna spoil much on top of that, other than it gets really crazy, right? So in the previous game, you had that like evil satanic cult that was like kidnapping kids and all that stuff that you had to stop. They were blue pilling everybody. If you play the game, you know what I'm talking about. It's not just a meme. But then there was like gang violence and mafia stuff and political corruption, I think out of all of the Legend of Heroes games, I think like this and Cold Steel are like the most political that they get, but in a good way, like they have a reason to like talk about, treaties and, talking about Crossbell becoming an independent state because there's all of these countries that want to get a piece of the Crossbell pie. And there's a lot of corruption and weapons dealing and potential human trafficking and stuff. And so it kind of exposes all of these other nations, right? Like Erebonia and Calvert and Liberl, is mainly, I think just Calvert and Erebonia is mainly those two. Liberl is kind of off doing their own thing. I don't think they're too involved in this, but is those two countries kind of being like, why are they fighting so much for this one place? Oh yeah, here's where all the gangsters meet up to do their corrupt stuff. Oh, I see. But it gets really interesting, right? Whenever people think political, people immediately go like, uh-oh, no politics in my game. But believe me, trust me on this, they execute on it so well. It just weaves in so naturally with the story. I mean, the characters that you play as, Lloyd and everyone else in the Triple S, they're cops, right? I mean, you're playing as a group of police officers, essentially, that are just trying to, solve mysteries and, save the people from crime and stuff. And so it's really important for you to explore the city and get to know all the characters, right? Because you're getting to know all of the people that you're going to protect eventually when they get in trouble, right? Just like in the previous game with the satanic cult and the mafia stuff and all that, here, they're cranking it up to 11. You got like mercenaries getting involved, you have other political powers coming in, Crossbell is changing, they want to become an independent state, they're not letting themselves get bullied by any of the other nations, but then of course there's other bigger stuff that happens throughout the story, right? If you guys have played the Cold Steel games, I think in particular Cold Steel 2, I think, where somewhere in the story, seemingly at random, there's a big giant like crystal tree that pops out of nowhere. And for me, that I never had any of this context. I was like, what the hell is that? What is that giant tree? What's going on? I don't know what's happening. And then they just kind of ignore it and move on. And it's like, what happened with that tree? Are we not going to do something about it? Well, here in Trails to Azure, we get answers to that. So what's happening here in Azure is at the same time as Cold Steel 2. And so all of these events are kind of happening simultaneously. So if you have questions about one event in one game, chances are you're going to get your answers in the other game. And so from my perspective, I got all of this information from Cold Steel 2 going, what the hell was that with the big tree? Well, in Azure, you get to see the big tree, and believe me, it is its own separate mess that we have to deal with. And yeah, it's fun. It's fun getting this almost like Marvel Cinematic Universe kind of thing going on, where things kind of cross over and connect in a really cool way. I would even argue that the Legend of Heroes franchise is probably better than the MCU currently, because at least with the Legend of Heroes, they're not trying to like oversaturate with so many Disney Plus shows and whatnot. And of course, how do you fix all of these problems? Well, by fulfilling requests from the people, which involves fighting a lot of monsters. And here, the battle system is just a little bit more expanded. It's kind of made more in the Cold Steel style, where you have Master Quartz. And so, Master Quartz, I wouldn't say it's like choosing your class, but it's a certain kind of quartz that gives you like a certain amount of abilities, and you can use those on top of the other quartz that you are manually putting in there. For anybody that's new that doesn't know what I'm talking about, here in the world of Legend of Heroes, you don't necessarily have like an electrical revolution. It's more like an orbiment, an orbal revolution. Instead of having electricity, you have orbal energy, right? So you have orbal lamps, you have orbal cars, orbal vacuum cleaners and stuff. You can go to a store in this game called Genten that has all of these electronic devices essentially, but it's orbal energy. And so it's like these balls that you equip onto like a gadget that you have, and those are basically your spells. Obviously each character has their own base stats that they can work with, but that doesn't mean that you can't customize them to pretty much whatever you want, you know? So that's what the Master Quartz is for, right? To kind of give them a basis, and then from that basis, you expand with more spells, right? So you can take somebody like Tio that might have a lot of agility at the start, but it's like, no, I want her to be a tank. And so you give her like a ground quartz, right? That has a bunch of ground abilities and high defense and all that stuff. And then it's all just brown, 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 just like healing and defense and stat, buffs and debuffs and all that kind of stuff. And then another day you can change your mind and go like, you know what? I don't want Tio to be a tank anymore. I want her to be, have a lot of agility and be a healer, right? So you can just take all of that off and just replace it all with like blue quartz for healing and green quartz for agility and wind powers and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a really interesting mechanic to play around with, right? And just like in Trolls from Zero, if I remember correctly, this is not something that I pay attention to a lot, but the individual quartz that you can synthesize or just find in the world, they have a certain value, right? It's like 3 points into wind and 2 points into fire or something like that, right? One quartz can have those values. And so as you keep stacking quartz one after the other, that amount, those numbers get bigger and bigger and bigger. And so the bigger the number is, the more abilities you can unlock for that element, right? So if you have a bunch of wind and it equals like 20 points or whatever, then you get all of the most powerful wind abilities, right? This is very different from, say, the Cold Steel games, where in Cold Steel, I'm pretty sure you can just go to the store and buy whatever ability you want, as opposed to here, where you kind of stack a bunch of stuff that's from the same element, and eventually it equals out into a bunch of abilities. So, yeah, every single Legend of Heroes game has their own kind of different, unique way of dealing with the orbment system. A lot of people like it, a lot of people hate it. I mean, this is something that I kind of had to warm up to as time goes on. At the beginning, I hated it, but as soon as it kind of, clicked in my head and I understood how it works, it became really fun to just kind of play around and create all of these different builds for all of my characters. I don't know if there's like profiles that you can have. That would be a really great addition to this game, to just have orbment profiles where it's like, okay, I need Lloyd to do this, or I need Lloyd to be this kind of character. I would love it to just be able to press a button, and there we go, just automatically give me all of these kinds of, orbments that I need. Maybe there is something like that. I know for Cold Steel and stuff like that is like, oh, make it offensive, make it defensive, focus on health, and it kind of automatically gives you some stuff. But I'm talking more about like customized profiles where I specifically set up what I want and then save it for later and just pull it out whenever I want. I don't think this game has that, but I would love it if it did. So yeah, the mechanics for the combat are pretty damn fun. And of course, when you have your loadout and you go out and you fight a bunch of monsters, it can be really fun to see all of that go into action, right? And just like with the previous game, you have your S-crafts, your S-breaks, and your dual S-breaks, where you can combine one character with another and do these really awesome, like super hyper attacks that usually end up being more powerful than your regular S-breaks. They're more powerful and they cost less points as well, because you have your HP and I think your MP, which is for magic, and then your CP. I know that I know how that sounds, but believe me, it's not what you think it is. But CP is something that kind of builds up over time, right? And so with your big awesome ability, you can either let that attack rip at 100 points, or you can wait until 200 points to make it even more powerful than before. But with the co-op attacks, you only need 100 points. And those are super duper powerful. And if you have 200 points, you can do that attack twice. So, like, if a battle gets really difficult and you're really struggling on a really high difficulty, because there's a bunch of difficulties as well. You can do easy, normal, hard, nightmare, or whatever. I usually just stick to normal or easy. I really don't like to torture myself with the combat in these games. I'm mainly here for the story. But when there is a difficult fight that you just can't, kind of shake yourself out of, you can do 2 of those co-op attacks, and that does a really good job at kind of turning the tables and giving you the difference between a failure or victory. And because this is a continuation of the previous game, you're not starting off at level 1 all over again. They acknowledge that, yeah, you've grown a lot, you've had a lot of experiences, and I can't remember at what level they start you off at. I think like level 80, I'm pretty sure. You're level 80 at the beginning of this game, and then it just goes to 90, to 100, 110, 120. You just get higher, 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 higher. Of course, all of that scales, right? That doesn't mean that the game is super easy, but that's just a really nice detail for the story, right? For you to, sometimes it kind of takes people out of the experience when the story has to like make up some reason for why you're back to level 1 again. Oh no, some demon stole all of your powers, or oh, you got really lazy with your training, so you're kind of rusty. Stuff like that where they kind of have to make up some reason. Oh no, I'm Metroid Samus and someone stole all my power-ups. I gotta go get him again. No, it's not like that here. And Ease is like that. You can be Idle Kristen and like, oh no, I lost all of my super powerful ultimate weapons from the previous game. Now I gotta start with a stick again, right? And that's kind of a running joke in the Ease games as well. But yeah, in The Legend of Heroes, they don't tend to do that, right? It's like, if you finish the previous game on a really high level, the sequel will continue at a very high level, all right? So I think that's just really cool. Another thing that's really cool is that if you beat the previous game, Trails from Zero, this game will actually ask you if you want to transfer your clear data to Trails to Azure. And I highly recommend that you do, because you get some special items, some benefits, but the most important stuff is for the story. So if you forged bonds and relationships with other characters, like say Tio or Ellie, for me it was Ellie that I kind of went all the way with in the previous game. And so if you don't pass over your save data, the dialogue tends to be kind of generic. And it feels like the dialogue changes where it needs to explain more things to you. But if you do transfer over your save, and this is why it is specifically the clear data and not just save data, it goes into the assumption that, okay, you beat the previous game, you know what happens in that other game, and so when we talk about those previous events again here, the characters will be like, oh yeah, that part in the theater where that thing happened. Oh yeah, that one time where Ellie was talking to her, to her grandfather, who's they didn't really mention little details like, oh yeah, Ellie's grandfather, the mayor of Crossbell, who's getting old and transferred his power to Dieter Croix. They don't really like look at the camera and go, just in case you forgot, this is what happened. No, they kind of go, oh yeah, that guy, right? Because you already know. You've already played that game. You already know all of these characters, so they don't really dwell too much on it. But when it comes to relationships, that's also really cool because they remember who you forged a relationship with before. And so I did it with Ellie. And so when you have Lloyd and Ellie meeting up again, you have this really nice scene where they're kind of staring at each other and blushing and all that kind of stuff. And the dialogue does change, as opposed to when you don't have a relationship with Ellie, and those cutscenes will work out pretty differently. Now, granted, the transferring over the save data doesn't change stuff that drastically. It's not like Mass Effect or The Witcher where, like, the implication is that you might get a totally different ending because of that. No, the story at large is generally the same, but it's those little details with all of the relationships that you forge with all the characters that make a pretty big difference in making the dialogue so much more juicy and vibrant and so much more fun to witness, especially now that the game has voice acting as well. In the Geofront translation of this game, it didn't come with any voice acting. You actually have to mod all of the voices in. But in this official release, the voice acting is already in it. You have higher resolution, higher frame rate. You can do turbo mode to go even faster if you think the fights are going a little slow. So basically, all of the stuff that was in the Geofront translated version of Trails to Azure and Zero, all of that is also happening in the official Western release, which I really appreciate, right? Translating the game is not the only work that you have to do. You also basically have to remaster the entire thing. And I really appreciate it because it came out, the fan-made version and the official version came out looking great in my opinion. The music is also really great. I think out of all of the games in the Legend of Heroes, I think the crossbow games have probably the best music. And even though you have a great story with higher stakes and more characters clashing and more stuff going on, you have the relationship stuff, you have your save data transfer, you have all the remastered stuff, you have the overhauled combat system that gives you the master quartz and all that stuff. And on top of that, you still have all of these events where you can play the little pump party mini game. You have a part where you go to Michelin, you can go to the beach and just enjoy some really great character moments. Obviously, we have the two Triple S members, Noelle Seeker and Wazi, so you get to know them. And of course, my wife, Noelle. I get to spend a lot of time with her. I really love it, especially during nighttime, when the day kind of winds down after working a lot on the Triple S and everything goes dark and it's nighttime and everybody's kind of unwinding and you always got these really nice, quiet, intimate moments with all the characters. And those are usually the super memorable, touching moments that really make this game truly great. And if you're like me and you've already played through all of the Sky games, all of the Cold Steel games, and you just need these Crossbell games to fill in the gaps, it fills in a bunch of gaps. There's a bunch of characters that show up in here that show up in the final battle of Cold Steel 3 and Cold Steel 4. There's a bunch of characters across over there, and you're like, oh, who are they? Where do they come from? And you play this, Trails to Azure, and a lot of them show up, right? You see the Jaegers, you see, Shirley, right? Shirley Orlando, a family member of Randy. You see Randy's backstory. You see freaking the big, knight ladies. I forget her name. Aryan Road, I think is her name. The girl that looks like she should be in Elden Ring or something. And you get smaller characters like Yin and Rishia Mao. You get characters like Sully. There's just a bunch of really cool characters that are pretty much introduced in this one game that go on to become a pretty big deal in future games. And so it's just really cool to just kind of see where all of those big names kind of come from. And I'll be honest, I could keep talking about this game all day, but that would mean spoiling the entire story and everything that happens. But needless to say, if you really loved Trails from Zero, then Trails to Azure does a really great job at taking everything that you loved from that previous game. And just like how Nintendo Life said, I think Nintendo Life put it very, very nicely on their review of the game, where they said they took everything good from Trails from Zero, and then they ran a marathon with it. That's exactly how they said it, right? They run a marathon with everything that's great about the previous game, and that's basically what this is. I think one of the biggest points of criticism from the previous game is the game ends eventually, and people get so enamored with these characters that they just want to see more and more and more of these dudes just doing more stuff. And Trails to Azure is very much that, is just the same characters that you already know, doing more and more stuff, talking to more people, interacting with each other, bantering with each other in a really great way. But when it comes to the story, the scale is bigger, the stakes are bigger, and there's a lot of stuff from the Cold Steel games that might kind of leave you scratching your head that are answered or introduced and are given more context in this game, right? So for anybody that has played all of the official Legend of Heroes games and you still need to play these crossbill games, think of it as like a sequel. No, not a sequel. It's like a prequel, right? Think of it as a prequel that kind of explains a lot of this stuff. So yeah, I went from not knowing who the hell Lloyd Bannings was to just him possibly being one of my favorite protagonists ever, So yeah, man, don't miss out on it. It's a really, really great game. Don't be fooled by the old-looking graphics. Don't be fooled by the fact that it's like a turn-based game or anything like that. This game has so much to give. And if you haven't played Trails from Zero yet, I highly, highly recommend that you play Trails from Zero first. Because again, all of that cross-save kind of stuff is really important in making the dialogue so much more fun to get through. Believe me, you're not going to regret it. These games are great. It really makes you wonder why it took so long for these games to come out in English, but thanks to people like the Geofront, thanks to people like Scott, fortunately, these games were finally being able to come out in the West, and that's just going to make the community grow even larger. More people are going to be fans of it, more people are going to play it, the community will get bigger, and that'll just be more people playing more Legend of Heroes games, this fantastic franchise from Falcom with just what is it, like 3 more games that we still need to get over here. 4 actually, the Nayuta game, and then Charles and the Reverie, and then Kuro no Kiseki 1 and 2. So yeah, those are 4 like really long RPGs that we still need to get over here. But it's very clear that the community and all of the fans will do anything possible to bring these games over. They have definitely shown that much. So thank you to NIS America for bringing this game over. Thank you to the Geofront for making the translations that became the basis of those releases, and of course, thank you to Scott Tijerina for all of his hard work. And yeah, seems like his dream came true, where everybody was able to enjoy these games thanks to his hard work. In fact, in the game, there's one of those chest quotes where like you see an empty chest and you can talk to it, and it gives you a fun message. And there's one of them written by Scott, I think, that goes, "Trails means the world to me too. I'm grateful I could share my world and my favorite story in it with you. Thank you for giving us a chance. All of this hard work will not be forgotten. Please, if you have even a passing interest in playing any of the Legend of Heroes games, doesn't even have to be Crossbell. I mean, I say Crossbell because those are the newest ones, but Trails in the Sky, 1, 2, and 3, those are all on Steam, and those are still pretty goddamn great. Cold Steel 1, 2, 3, and 4, those are all fantastic games as well. So I recommend all of them. Again, this is a very, like, anime, RPG, MCU kind of thing, where every game connects with one another in pretty amazing ways. So if you want to get that feeling, then I highly recommend these games. There are a lot of value as well. No microtransactions, no battle passes or anything like that. Just solid, lengthy games with a good beginning, middle, and end that are going to stick with you. That will mark you for a pretty good long while. I don't regret at all playing through all of these games and using all of my time playing through all of them because it's worth it. And Trails to Azure is probably one of the more iconic and memorable games in the entire series. So now is a better time than any to get into it and let yourself get taken for a ride. Yeah.